security people. I'm re-recording the talk that I did at the Day of Security in San Francisco, or just south of there, in May 2023, because the sound was a little rough in that, and I wanted you to be able to hear me. So hello, my name is Breanne Boland. I work in product security at Gusto, and this talk is all about communication in the many different ways that it can take while doing security work. And when I tell you, it takes many different ways, but we'll get into that. So over the next 20-25 minutes, we're going to look at some techniques and approaches to communication as part of security measures that I find useful, and I hope you do too. There's also lots of drawings and pictures of cats because part of effective communication is incentivizing the attention that you want. To start, to give you a little bit of background, because I think it helps understand where I come from. My name is Breanne. I worked in product security, but before I went into security and tech at all, I was an editorial professional, a word person, and also a thread through all of my careers is that it seems like I'm always having to talk someone into something, which is unfortunately a really useful skill to have. So if you have it too, maybe there's a place for you in security. But I bet you have other skills that are applicable too, even if you haven't had to quietly, subtly push people into doing stuff all the time. My background involves tons of writing and telling other people how to write and communicate effectively, as well as watching things that were really well intended go sometimes terribly wrong. I've also written and talked about this subject and kind of this theme before. It's a favorite of mine. If you look up B-Sides SF 2022 and 2023, I have a talk about documentation that was super fun. I have one with a friend of mine about not making enemies and being adversarial when enforcing security stuff. And if you would like some more information about different ways to find your way into security, I have blog posts that are linked in my deck on becoming a security partner and what that is, and also just generally becoming a security engineer. It's a great path, so if there's anything you ever think I could tell you, reach out and let me know, please. Our journey today, we're going to start with looking at people, then we're going to look at the medium and message, obstacles you might encounter, and then the wonderful, definitely no problems to come future that we're going to get to together. So it's true for all tech work, but especially in security, how you say things matters. What you say matters, and also when you say it matters. Security work, we often have the disadvantage of being brought in kind of late, which means that not only were we not right on time as we would have liked to have been, but we also have to deliver hard truths that other people might have been avoiding throughout a project, and then having to push initiatives forward despite other things that people might want. Because of all of that, being a good and careful communicator, it's important in all of tech. It's super useful, but it is especially useful in security. Some examples that I've seen or been involved with, you are required to use this new password manager when people might not really want to. Or we'll soon be requiring signed GitHub commits for PRs to be merged. Maybe we're undergoing a major tool change and suddenly the way that testing works is going to be different. Or just the classic, we need everyone to complete a mandatory training that keeps our company certified in an important way, but that everyone finds kind of boring. Our broader theme here, though, is no surprises. No one should be caught off guard by security work if we can help it. No one should be able to say honestly that they weren't informed. And this means that we have work to do. We can't do any of this without knowing who we're talking to. No communication effort, like not any of it, should be done without knowing and naming your audience. Sometimes it's everyone at a company, but usually it's not. Before you write a word or a talking point or an idea, you gotta know who you're talking to. Which brings us to the sad story of buy-in and how it's absolutely mandatory to succeed in any of this work. Now, it may be that buy-in has been achieved before you get the job or move on to the project, which is amazing. This is the dream. But even if the deal was sealed before, things can degrade across time. Think of it as bit rot for agreements. And even if you haven't gotten it, this ends up being your first and continuing task. Telling people what you're doing so they can continue to think it's a good idea and worth their time and attention. Security can be viewed as superfluous or just kind of outside of what other people consider their job opportunity or job responsibilities to be. It's our job to remind them that security is actually everyone's job, but it happens to be our job a little bit more on account of the titles and everything. When you hear about political situations and work environments, this is going to be a lot of what you're hearing about if you're dealing with a healthy organization. There are actually good work politics. We just talk about it less, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. The bigger your goals, the more people you are going to have to convince of things. Some convincing is really easy, though. Um, it can be way simpler in a small company, for instance, although you're more likely to be blocked by, say, the capricious desires of an owner or someone who's been around since the company was only 3 people, so they feel more ownership over things. Some ownership is healthy, and then some of it's annoying and can get actually kind of toxic across time. However, we can't do anything, not anything big especially, without buy-in, which can literally mean convincing people who write checks, but it also means convincing people who are going to be affected by your work for better or for worse. This can be done in a lot of ways. It can be a quick conversation, an elaborate presentation, or anything in between. Sometimes it's easier if we have a friendly relationship with the person, separate of work, and that fact is both good and bad. How, though, do we determine who you should talk to? A quick version, which I don't recommend, but it is effective, is to turn something off and wait for the fallout. I cannot really recommend this, especially like early in the process of kind of getting in with a group of people you need to get on your side, but it does work. Also, sometimes just threatening it itself can be really effective. Instead, though, because we are here to make friendlies, if not necessarily friends, we get to look into history. Think Git logs, meeting notes, members of channels, Slack comments and conversations. If you haven't been at a company for a good chunk of time, ask your buddy who's been there longer. There's usually a few people around who keep the history, and being pals with that person is super useful. And also, they're usually really interesting and entertaining, and it's fun to have work friends. So find that person and see what they have to say about what you're looking at. What are the other different kinds of people, though? We're probably going to have to adjust our message and our medium to reach different groups. It's how it goes. No single message is going to be appropriate for everyone. On the plus side, if you like that, if you like crafting and adapting a message, your job security just got stronger. So everyone that we're looking at here on the screen, they're all valid kinds of people that we have to work with. It is part of the job. Sorry about that. Hopefully this wonderful picture of my cat, Susie Q, will make it go down easier. So what are the different groups? To start all the way over to the left, technical or not, talking to engineers versus non-engineers. This is something that comes up a lot, and unfortunately I don't think it comes up in a useful way very often. This question is never about who's like technical or not, and I think those quotes are really important. And I consider other people who are really willing to divide people up in that way to be kind of a red flag parade if that's the first distinction that they reach for. And sometimes it suggests that they just get annoyed talking to people who aren't like them. If you want to get good at this work, I recommend not clinging to this distinction. We can get more specific and more useful, but to stay really high level and be like, they're technical, this is not useful. What gets more useful is things like, you have to talk to people who aren't interested. And with security work, this is always going to happen. Whether they just view us as an obstruction and something that's going to slow them down, or just, frankly, they don't care about the subject, they're going to be there, and that's okay. Some people aren't going to care, and we're not going to make them, and we don't have to. We just want to give them the minimum viable task that helps us achieve our goal. To work with them, plan on reminders, but if you can, try not to remind people of things if they've already done it. See if there's a way to keep tabs on that, because if people already did their homework, it disincentivizes them if they know that they're still going to be, reminded 17 times, no matter, when they did it. These folks, though, they don't want to learn more today, and they don't have to because it's not their job. Their job is, however, just enough compliance to help us get things done. If you keep that in mind, life's going to be easier for both them and you. Next group, talking to people who don't want to help you. And this can overlap with the group before, but it is a little bit different. In any group of people, some of them are going to be uncooperative. And your life is going to be easier if you just assume that a small subset of any group you deal with are going to be this way. The real problem emerges if it's too many people. Think more than about 5%. That's where I find it really becomes an issue, because it becomes more representative of some other issue. So if that's not the case, or if it's the case that there's that many people, that's not a communication problem, it's a cultural problem, and that's the kind of problem you should send up the food chain. But if they're regular, old, kind of disagreeable people, sometimes you just need to set an example. You just have to just show them, like, honestly, you kind of wear them down. Just let them know it's going to happen. We just need you to do this, and make it worth their while to just give you what you want so that you can go away. Next, people who don't like tech, people who don't want to touch the tech, people with tech allergies. And this is where we are finally getting somewhere that describing people as non-technical might be relevant, but we need to be more specific than that to keep it useful. These are just people who don't want to deal with this. They have jobs that specialize in other things. It's not their interest. Maybe they've had bad experiences. There are lots of reasons for people not to be into this. For them, though, we want to keep the asks really small and specific, and you want to keep your vocabulary humble and easy to understand, because we really want to be mindful about not making these folks feel dumb, because they're not. They just know something different than what we're doing. In particular, never use words like just or easy, but especially don't use them with this group. And it's never a good idea, but some people are going to be more sensitive to it than others. Instead, try to find out what they do know and use it as an example for a comparison. Speaking of trying to get attention, that's my cat Vincent Valentine saying hello. Anyway, find out what they know, kind of work that vocabulary into what you're doing and show them that they do know things. And this helps them relax because you're suddenly speaking their language, and they're going to be a little bit more cooperative because they're not waiting to be spoken down to. Then there's our last group, pals, buddies, allies, excited people. These are my favorite because I get to tell them really cool things. I like to reward them with both information and attention. And the cool thing is that these people can become security champions or at least allies over on a team, and they can also become security professionals. Hello, it is I, a former security pal. Let's look at ways to communicate with people now that we figured out, what group we're looking at and what we need to consider around what they're doing. Some options: email. Yes, still, some companies rely on it more than others, but it should always be considered. There's chat. Slack and Teams are the ones I hear most often now. There are others. It's most likely your go-to, not guaranteed, but pretty likely that that's going to be the number one way that you want to reach people. Then there are meetings, the big meetings that include everyone, like they have terms like all hands and all company and State of the Union and stuff like that, like everyone meetings. There's also small meetings, which can be, you don't have the reach, but the targeting is really good. You just talk to one team or even like a one-on-one to get the information out there. And then there are your resource pages, which tend to be more static. Think Confluent, think wikis, stuff like that. What we want to know with that is like, where are people looking to find different types of information? What kind of roles do you use different resources? I found this a lot in companies that some teams will be super psyched about Google Docs, or at least, usefully resigned. Some are all about Confluent. Some, have this tangled history of Jira tickets that they look at. You want to know where people are finding information so that you can read them there. You also want to know there are resources that get posted that kind of have to be in places, but they get ignored. You want to know that just so that you make sure that the information is where it needs to be, but you're not putting too much information into a resource that is checking a box but not actually meeting a need, if you know the distinction. In that case, it's also useful to know how sharing permissions work. Some companies are super locked down, and you have to either check 3 boxes or ask the keeper of the permissions to expand it for certain things. If you work in one of those companies, you want to integrate that into your process so that you don't get upset when you're so close to the end of the line and then you go, oh yeah, I have to go ask Bobby to let the other team in. If it's something you have to do, just account for it, keep it in your list. An honorable mention, sort of, is hard copies of things. This is, especially in a more highly remote era, rare, but it's not impossible. So it's just something to watch out for. So I'm going to show you an example. This is a draft communication section of a project plan that I'm working on for expanding use of a tool at my job. We already use it some. The goal is to expand it, to use it more, and it will in some places replace existing tooling, which means I'm going to have to interfere with someone else's process. This is something I approach very, very delicately because I don't need the added problem of additional resistance. So this makes it especially tricky because different groups and teams will experience different possible effects. So it's in our interest, in my interest, and my team's to be extra special, thorough when communicating stuff. Not all plans need to look like this one. This is a high-level thing I consider pretty detailed, but in this case, this one does, just because I'm trying not to step on people. It's easier for me to plan to be very, very, very communicative early in a process with the option then of scaling it back as time goes on. It's easier to pare back later if you need to, and I find it easier and better to start big. So this is the long version. Let's look at the themes and the higher level actions. To break it down, here's my plan. I want to look at what is already written. What are people's existing expectations? What are they used to? What are they taking for granted? Just to get a sense of like what I either will get to use or have to push back against. I want to establish a single go-to place for information about it. Hi, Betty. Um, and either it's something that already exists, or it's something that I will make and name really carefully so people can find it. Then I want to find all of the stakeholders that are involved so that I can communicate with them regularly, get their opinions. I want them to feel like they are being very solicited for their opinions. And then from there, based on, in part, those conversations, figure out how I want to talk about this. And also where to disseminate the information as we get it, aside from like that go-to place. So it could be like Confluence and then Slack and then emails. It can be that plus, this meeting that talks to this team and this meeting that talks to this org. And there are different ways to go about it. And then finally, once I know what I want to do, to build ongoing structure for this communication so that I'm not inventing everything as I go along. Things to keep in mind as I go on. Is it enough just to have that really more static page, or do we want to have a bunch of other automated stuff to show up in different places? The goal is just to get to the point of starting to fill people in and finding those allies. There are always going to be people who aren't excited about this kind of thing, but somewhere out there, there's someone who agrees with the need that you're meeting, and they're going to be pretty excited to help you. All right. Well, how do we figure out what to use for what? How do we know the right method for each group? And the high-level answer is we ask them. What was true at your last company, or at least was true for you, might not apply to all of the groups that we're trying to reach. So instead, we have to pick methods and match them to the people that we're trying to reach and what they actually need. Things to look at. Cultural norms. That's a big one, because why fight against things if we don't have to? Might not be your favorite medium, and honestly, unless it's a medium that genuinely doesn't work, your opinion might not matter here, and that's okay. We just have to deal with that. We are working to serve all the people. So for cultural norms, listen to conversations, read the chat, look at stats on existing documents, like what do people actually look at and read? And also just ask around. Hey, that thing that we put out 3 months ago, did you like it? What didn't work for you? Ask honest questions, be really receptive to the answers, and you'll learn some really helpful stuff here. To that end, there's also A/B testing. If you have a really large population to work with, this can be something that's worked in technology. If not, it can be as simple as sending both things to someone who's representative of a group you want to meet and having them say, oh yeah, B's way better, although A's organization was great. Give people things to compare against rather than just saying what you think, and sometimes you'll get much more concrete opinions that you can actually do something based on. Your experiences at other jobs are worth considering. Just don't consider them absolutely true, because it is most likely a largely or totally different group of people. But it's something to give you ideas, at least, stuff to verify in the group you're working in now. There's also combining lots of stuff. The great thing, which we'll get to in a second, is you can't just say anything once. It's never going to work. So instead, just trying out different combinations of the ways that you have to reach people is probably going to get you a lot of the way there. There's also research, depending on how rigorous and formal the stuff you're trying to do is. There might be good papers and explorations of it out there, conference talks, stuff like that. It's always worth seeing what other people are doing. And then finally, repeating yourself a lot. It's part of good talk organization. It's part of good communication with people. Once upon a time, the understanding was that a tweet's lifetime was 24 minutes. So you knew if you were promoting something, you needed to say it over and over. The same is true internally with security stuff. So one medium, probably not going to be enough. Think less entree, more buffet. In conclusion, the work is never done, just, in the positive job security sense. In that respect, it's great, actually. Hi, Vincent. So troubleshooting. Nip or spray bottle. I opt for nip with him, and it's usually better for other people too. So problem one, I keep saying this, but no one seems to hear it. Thing one, keep saying it, and I know, but keep saying it. It is actually what we have to do. Beyond that, change media. If you find that people are ignoring things in Slack, go for that meeting. If you find people are ignoring things in the meeting, go a little more grassroots and go one-on-one. If all else fails, try roping in someone with a bigger voice. This isn't my favorite move because I want to feel that I am properly empowered to do my job without reaching for someone, allegedly more important than me. But sometimes we do need amplification. So yeah, if all else fails, see how high a person in the food chain you can get to say the thing that you want to have said. Next, no one's reading my email/Confluence page, which can also be no one came to the meeting, no one watched the video. Basically, you're not getting the numbers you need to do your job. In this case, I recommend finding a few people who are representative of who you're trying to reach and talking to them. Ask them how they take information in, what is less disruptive from their day-to-day. What are the other demands on their time? What are you competing with in order for them to get their job done? It's rare, though, that one method is enough. Always consider the combo platter, and you want to verify that against what people actually want to do. Or, I keep trying stuff, but people never do what I want them to do, no matter how hard I try. Also known as herding cats. If you feel wildly off base, stop iterating and go back to talking to the people. This is another good one where it's good to go and talk to someone who's been around for a while. And you want to also make sure you have someone in your early phase who will give you really good, honest feedback. This can get difficult in companies that prioritize being nice over being effective. But if you keep asking, usually there will be someone who will give you the information you need. If all else fails, I like being really specific. I am writing or creating this specific document for this specific audience to describe this information for this purpose. As long as you have that specific thing on whatever you're trying to make, it becomes a lot easier to pick apart what's going wrong. Another one, no single group of people uses the same resources as any other group in the company. And this is not weird, this is normal. We have to plan for this. Is it possible that you can have it controlled in one place, like maybe a repo in GitHub, and then syndicating it elsewhere to Confluence, to Google Docs, to your company wiki, so that you can only change things in one place, but it gets propagated everywhere else? That can be a really good solution to this. And for this, I recommend talking to your marketing team. They do this stuff all the time. Content repurposing, that is their whole gig. So they might know about some tools that are already approved and paid for that could start making your life easier. Another thing to do, see if you can deputize someone on the team that is especially hard to reach and ask them to help you get information out about where stuff lives that you want people to read. And then there's, I keep getting shut down. In this case, we want to go back to the buy-in phase. Yes, kind of back to the very beginning. But if this keeps happening, ask whether it's ever going to happen here. And if the company or team actually wants you to be doing what you're there to be doing as much as you were led to believe. I don't want to say, to lead you into defeat, but life's too short to keep fighting unwinnable battles. And if you find yourself having to fight for really basic stuff all the time, maybe it's not the place to be. Which brings us to the end. Things to keep in mind. No single method of communication is going to work for everyone you want to read or reach, and that's okay. It's completely normal. Everyone's being fine. We just have to work a little differently on it. We want to observe reactions and iterate based on what we see happen as we release things and try to work with people. Err on the side of repeating yourself. Tell them what you're going to say. Tell them what you said, just like this slide is doing. Honest feedback is the thing that we rely on to make any of this work. Super important, so keep soliciting it if it's not given really easily and voluntarily early on. Introduce and treat new things carefully, not too many at a time. Work to remember why things did and didn't work. Learn from your iteration, write things down as you go. And finally, ask the keeper of the history because they know things. All right. That's it. If you like writing about this subject and talks, find me at brianneBoland.com. I write blog post versions of every talk I do and post videos. Lots of stuff about communication. And if you want to just say hello on the internet, I am toxoplasmosis at mastodon.social. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope to see you at a future Day of Security. And if you have any questions about the subject, please reach out. I would love to talk to you about them. Thanks so much.